Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Great to have you with us on the program. And back with us on the program, Clifford S. Coull. He's been with us before talking about his book, Like Trees Grow Together, A Spiritual Journey. Cliff is a native of Montreal, Canada, began his professional career in information technology. After he moved his young family to the San Francisco Bay Area, his marriage fell apart. He was suddenly a single parent, began looking towards spirituality for guidance. After studying Eastern philosophies and Sanskrit, he came to understand wholly the concept of reincarnation. With the spiritual awakening, he discovered previously unknown psychic abilities, including visions and premonitions. My Unbelievable Life is the third in a memoir trilogy that includes Are You Wearing a Barrel? And Like Trees Grow Together, A Spiritual Journey. Cliff lives in Sonoma County in the heart of Californian wine country, and he's with us on This Week in America. Cliff, welcome back to This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the show.
Oh, welcome. I'm very happy to be back with you, Rick. I was looking forward to this.
It was a great discussion we had last time. The book was Like Trees Grow Together, A Spiritual Journey. This is the third in the series, My Unbelievable Life. And I want to start off by talking about childhood, because you say that even as a child, you were always asking questions. To this day, you're asking questions, trying to put everything in perspective. Talk a little bit about the childhood, what you went through as a child growing up.
Well, growing up in Montreal, Canada, my mother was a bit of a psychic, and I grew up with hearing that, her having a vision and some of the experiences she had. And I certainly didn't have anything like what she was describing, so, but growing up with that, it tends to go in one ear and out the other, it's just kind of okay, pass the butter,
Yes.
So I've heard a lot about that. But then when I went through the divorce and became very introspective through that, and doing a lot of soul searching, and then I guess that must have kicked in my psychic muscle, having that experience, and being a single parent and so forth of 4 children. So that probably was the cause of getting that psychic muscle to kick in. And so I was starting to have some interesting experiences, and called my mother one time when I had this vision of this full face of a woman that I certainly didn't know, and called her on that. And I said, describing this vision that I had, and I asked my mother, I said, "Mom, who am I?" And her response to that was, "Just live your life, Clifford. It may be just a guide that you're having, And I said, "Oh, all right." So it didn't really excite me and get me nervous about having these experiences, but because I had the experiences of hearing the experiences of my mother, but yeah, so that probably was the trigger of that divorce, which I certainly didn't expect to happen, and probably triggered the psychic muscle kicking in there.
Well, there were a number of experiences, and our guest on the program is Clifford S. Coull. It's Clifford with 2 F's. S. Coull is Coull. I spell that out because that's his website, cliffordscoull.com. The book is My Unbelievable Life. You can link on directly to Clifford's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The book, of course, is available all across the country. Check it out at amazon.com. You mentioned experiences. It goes all the way back to a Christmas in a childhood. And you talk about the one memory when your dad came home and he had 2 professionally wrapped packages, and that really impressed you. And there's a memory with that actually came back later in your life. Talk about that experience and that the vision of a young woman, which came back later in your lifetime.
Yeah, well, those gifts. Yeah, I still remember those gifts. I was the younger of 2 children. My older brother, and he was kind of the favorite, with my mother. I guess because she was childless for so long, about 7 years marriage and not having a child, and I guess my father had a hernia which affected his ability to help her conceive, and got that fixed. So then she finally had a child, my brother. So I guess that kind of stuck with her, as being somewhat of her favorite. And I would get me coming along a couple of years later, is somewhat more anticlimactic, you know. So,
Yes.
so I kind of grew up with that. And then and my father kind of sensed that little bit of favoritism there. So he came home one Christmas and he had these two beautifully wrapped Christmas gifts. And I had never seen professionally wrapped Christmas gifts before. And he walked in and I just looked at them and I said, "Oh, no, no, no." And I started crying a bit because I figured they're probably for Fred, my brother, you know, not me, something that beautiful. And then he comes and says, "Now, how do you know they're not for you?" And it turns out they were for me. And the one that was red, wrapped in nice red wrapping with green ribbons on it, that was a Meccano set, which is kind of like in the States, you have the erector sets. In Canada, they had the Meccano set where you can construct stuff and that type of thing.
Yes.
As I say, similar to an erector set. And the other one was all silver with blue ribbon on it, and that was an airplane, like a big passenger airplane, which folded up and so forth, and it was a silver plane, you know. And so that was the two gifts was Meccano set and an airplane, all both professionally wrapped. Never forgot those two gifts, that's for sure.
Well, talk about the vision of the young woman that, well, let you tell the story that later in life you really believed that that was your father.
Well, I came to with my first book, Are You Wearing a Barrel? And that's how I finally proved that she was my father reincarnated. Now, I had been exposed through other acquaintances, friends, and it got me into, after my divorce, got me into the Eastern philosophies, going to ashrams and the Vedanta Society in San Francisco. And so picking up on the Eastern philosophies and yoga and so forth. This gal that was taking me around, she used to teach yoga classes, and she was originally Roman Catholic, born in Austria, but she got involved into yoga and the Eastern philosophies and attending the Vedanta Society on a regular basis, and then had me going with her on to these. And also we went and saw Swami Satchitananda, that he's passed on now, but he came to San Francisco, and I went to lectures with her of his lectures, and so that got me exposed to a lot of the Eastern philosophies and the concept of Sanskrit. And I've had readings from psychics, and who, one psychic was, her name, I remember, Betty Bethards. She's passed on now, but she told me that I had 9 lives as a woman, and the rest were men. So he says, you're in good balance between your female side and your male side, because you've had a lot of experiences of being both. And I've always sensed that I had been a woman, because I've always had, I can identify with women and their feelings very easily. And when I went through the divorce, it was like nothing for me to take over and have custody of the children. And so then I was thinking back, and I said, geez, that was very easy for me to do that. So maybe Betty Bethards was making a lot of sense there, that probably I was a woman. And I certainly I felt that I was. I've always felt that I'd been a woman before.
Well, it's interesting, the progress, the route that you take. And the book is called My Unbelievable Life. This is the third in a memoir trilogy by our guest in the program, author Clifford S. Coull. That's Clifford with 2 F's, S, and Coull is Coull. His website is cliffordscoull.com. The book is My Unbelievable Life. That's available, as well as his other 2 books, Are You Wearing a Barrel? And Like Trees Grow Together, A Spiritual Journey. Both are available at Amazon. Information, of course, available at Cliff's website. And you can link on directly, by the way, by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You talk in this book about your life, and you talk in there about the divorce, and it's not something you ever thought you were going to was going to happen in your life. And you have 3 children at the time, and you 4 children at the time, and you're going like, I'm not going to give her any more than I really have to give her. And you said you had a sort of verbal communication, a verbal message at the time. You're not sure where that came from. And again, this is another one of these experiences you had that said, what, Clifford, she bore you three children, and you followed that advice. Talk about that experience, because this was not your mindset at the time, was to give her anything other than what you had to.
Well, yeah, and that verbal communication I had, when I was going through that, and that was my mother, and my mother had passed on by that time, but she came to me, and said, Cliff, she bore you three children, so he says, help her out as much as you can, so that's when I came home, and I told her that, okay, whatever you need, I'll help you. That was quite a profound experience for me, having that communication from her.
The book is called My Unbelievable Life. Clifford S. Coull, our guest on the program. Information at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Amazon, among the many places you can find My Unbelievable Life, Cliff's newest book. Talk a little bit about when you realized, I'm having these visions, I have these recurring visions, I'm getting these messages. When you suddenly realized, I really need to follow up with this and see, because they almost became overpowering at a time when they're trying to get your attention, and finally you devoted your attention to it.
Yes, well, these experiences that I've had, and I started really paying attention, and that vision that I had of that young woman, that was a real startling one for me, because that, as I said, that spooked me a little bit, because other visions I had, I could just kind of shake them off. I'd see eyes and that type of thing. I'd just shake them off and they'd just go away. But not this one. It hung in there till it was ready to leave on its own. It just stayed there and just looking at me, and just like looking in a mirror and only not seeing your own face, And yeah, so that one spooked me a little bit, and it faded away when it was good and ready to fade away. So that got my attention, and then about the follow up on how resolving who that was, I started working for the city and county of San Francisco in their IT department, and this is about 8 years later after I had that vision of her, and then this gal, this Latina, starts working in our department, for the city and county of San Francisco in our IT department, and we seem to get very close and hitting off. We go to lunch together, and she invited me to go to a Friday night soiree with her, with a group at work that used to go out like monthly or every month or two, and have after work and have a dinner at a restaurant, that type of thing. So I said, sure, I'll be honored to be your escort. So I went with her on one of those, and that was the start, really, of our relationship going on that. And so then one time we were going out to lunch together, and she, as I said, she was Roman Catholic, but I started speaking to her about the visions that I had, and then I started just mentioning about this vision of this woman that I had. I said, it certainly looked like a woman to me. And I said, come to think of it, it looked a lot like you, And then a thought came to me about asking her when her father had passed away. And so I just followed up on that thought. And I said, when did your father pass away? And she told me, and I said, oh, okay. I said, no, it can't be that. And she says, why? Why are you asking me that? And I said, well, I was just figuring if that vision that I had was you, it might have been something very tragic that was happening at the time for you to be transmitting so powerfully to me to pick you up like that. And I said, no, I said, this occurred about 3 years before your father passed away. So I said, it's just a thought. And I had my head down, but back to eating my lunch. Then I look up and she's crying and her tears are pouring down her face. And I said, what is it? What's wrong? What's wrong? She says, that's when my godfather passed away. He lived upstairs from us. My sister and my mother lived upstairs from us. And I said, he was the father figure in my life. My father and mother had divorced when I was very young. So my father wasn't in my life at all, but my godfather was. And he passed away at that time. And she was 16 at the time when that happened. So I said, oh, wow. I said, okay, wrong father. And then I thought, okay, if that was her, then why me? And I figured, boy, I'm not going to figure out the answer to that one, But then one day I passed in her cubicle, and she was running around in stocking feet there, and I just kidded her, and I said, "Is that up the dress code, running around in stocking feet?" She says, "Well, I can't see what you're wearing on the other side of that cubicle wall. What are you wearing, a barrel?" And I just laughed, and then it hit me. Then I had a clue of who she was because my dad uh, was very much into the editorial pages in Montreal, and there was a editorial cartoonist with the Montreal Gazette by the name of John Collins, and he had this cartoon character, which was supposed to be the Canadian taxpayer, and he wore a barrel and a big top black hat, and he named it You Know Who, UNO, and then WHO. And my father's favorite expression was anytime there's taxes coming on the scene in the news, he'd all said in a conversation with people, said, "Well, you know who's going to get stuck with that one." And everyone laughed because that was a very popular cartoon. Everybody in the Montreal area in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they knew that cartoon character.
Yes.
So
well, suddenly
so
all the dots were connected at that point in time when she said that. It all made sense to you.
Then it made sense to me who she was. So then I had to approach her on that, and I said, we got together, and I said, "How come you asked me if I was wearing a barrel? Did you see somebody wearing a barrel lately?" She says, "Oh, no, things just pop into my head." And I said, "I was afraid you're going to tell me something like that." And I said, "I bet you do all the laundry at home, don't you?" She says, "Well, I do mine." And I said, "Oh, I'm sure you do yours because I bet you're a real pro at it." And she started to describe to me her routine for her doing her laundry. And she breaks the clothes down in different piles based on type of fabric, color of fabric, because there's different additives for and different water temperatures for each load, depending on what it was in that load. And as she was describing this, tears are starting to pour down my face. And she says, "What is it, Cliffy? What is it?" I said, "You're my father." I said, "He was the laundry manager of the Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal, Canada, which is a huge teaching hospital, is affiliated with the McGill University School of Medicine. He knew his laundry." And I said, "This was, for him, it is a science project." And then that cartoon character, she described it. She said it was only in black and white, and it wore a big hat. And I couldn't remember in detail because I was confusing two cartoon characters that wore a barrel. There was a syndicated in the comics on the weekend of Moon Mullins.
Oh, yes.
And he would wear a barrel. I guess he'd go out gambling or something. If he had a bad night gambling, then you'll see him showing up wearing a barrel. And I was getting confused with that cartoon character and the one that's on the editorial pages in the Montreal Gazette. And I was kind of figuring, I was very young, so I figured it's the same character, I was confusing the two when I was younger. But she described it saying it was only in black and white and wore this big hat. And I said, well, maybe it was in black and white through the week in the papers, but in color in the comics. Because, as I said, I was confusing the two. And she just kind of looked at me confused, like. Anyway, I did the research and I called the newspaper and I was asking about that cartoon character. And he says, "Oh, yeah." He said, "That was our editorial cartoonist then." He said, "He's retired now," but he said, "That was John Collins. And he lives in Dorval." And he said, and I got a phone number from him to give him a call. So I got a hold of John Collins, and he sent me a drawing of You Know Who that I have on the cover of my first book, Are
Yes.
You Wearing a Barrel? And signed it. And then when I saw that cartoon character came in the mail and found this gal at work, she was right on both counts, and it was only in black and white, and it wore the big black hat, and I couldn't remember it as well as she did.
That's just an amazing story. The book is My Unbelievable Life. Clifford S. Coull back with us on the program. Books available at Amazon as well as the other books in the trilogy. Are You Wearing a Barrel that we just talked about, and Like Trees Grow Together, A Spiritual Journey, which we talked about on the program a while back with Clifford, and that's available on our website on YouTube. I got a couple of minutes left in the program. At the end of in the conclusion section of the book, you say that you like the reader to consider two things: we are not alone in this universe, and that life is a cyclic process. Let's talk about that briefly, because it sort of pulls together what you're talking about and what you've learned through your life.
Well, what I've learned is that the soul really runs the show, and then the conclusions I come up with too is how to explain prodigies like a Mozart writing a symphony at 5, and then you have like Scott Pelley had a story on this. What was his name? He was a child. He was about 5, and he wrote a symphony, and then he did a follow-up, and he was 14 at the time, and here he was in a recording studio with the London Philharmonic.
Wow.
Recording his 14th symphony that he did. And Blue, yeah, what the heck, Blue, he signed his name as Blue Jay for all his work. And I'm just trying to remember what his name was. It just escapes me.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with
anyway,
that
but
either.
Scott Pelley had featured on 60 Minutes a story about him. So that was another example. And I've got a few other examples in my book, my third book of prodigies. And then how do you explain the sexual orientations that we have? You know, you got the homosexuals, heterosexuals, and bisexuals, and the cross-dressers, so to me it makes more sense to be able to answer why we have these things happening when you accept reincarnation. One body and one life to live just doesn't support that. And these are just actual things that are happening in life. Look at we had, what's his name, Bruce Jenner? And
yes.
That's the story he had. And that, he felt his soul was a soul of a woman, and the aggravation and grief that he was going through with that, and the confusion with that. And, and I'm listening to his story, and I said, of course, you have a feeling like you have a soul of a woman because you've probably been a woman a lot.
Yeah, and that starts making sense to you. That's one of the questions why that Clifford asks a lot through his life, and then he suddenly starts getting the answers. And I'm going to leave with a quote in the book, and then I'll give you just a few seconds here to sort of summarize. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. That really puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
Certainly does. It certainly does. And then I also had I had this book that was sent to me, the TWIA Prophecy, where this Frenchman that lives in Australia by the name of Michel Desmarquis would be his name, and he was abducted, if you will, by aliens, and he documented this book, and they took him, and the whole purpose of that was to take him back to their planet and show him around and to teach him, because they wouldn't want him to write a book and document his experience that they had with them, because they want to communicate with the people on planet Earth. That they got to change their focus. They're growing in the technology-wise, but their main purpose on Earth is to grow spiritually and to not lose track of that. And so he ended up writing this book, the TWIA Prophecy, THIAOOUBA is the spelling. And I guess it's more pronounced more closely to Jehovah because the T is silent. So it's
right.
Jehovah Prophecy, which is the name of the planet that these people were from.
Well, that story and many more available in the book, My Unbelievable Life. That's the third in a 3-part memoir trilogy by our guest on the program today, Clifford S. Coull. Clifford is 2 F's. S. Coull is Coull. His website is cliffordscoull.com. The other books in the series are You Wearing a Barrel and Like Trees Grow Together, A Spiritual Journey. The latest is My Unbelievable Life. The book's available, of course, of Clifford's website, available information at Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Cliff, it is always a pleasure to have you on the program. Great to have you back with us. A fascinating book called My Unbelievable Life. Thank you for sharing that with us on the program.
Well, you're very welcome, Rick. I enjoy having our chats.
It was great having you with us, and we look forward to doing it again. The book is My Unbelievable Life. Clifford S. Coull, our guest on This Week in America. Of course, information available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.